Hi everyone, Glenn Hayden here. I think we're going to wait a minute or two just in case there's any latecomers. Okay, I think I'm back. Hi Jaidev. You can hear me, everybody? Jaidev, you'll let me know, won't you? I think I'm fine to go. I'll just wait. Yes, good. Lots of thumbs up. Hi everybody. Welcome to Coconut Theatre. Thank you so much to Coconut Theatre for inviting me to come online and talk. It's always difficult when it's not interactive, especially when you're more of a theatre artist than film or television. I much prefer to be interactive and talking to you, but with conditions the way they are, this is the way it is. So firstly, look, I hope everyone's safe and I hope everyone's coping really well with being locked down. I mean, we're into, 3 months in India. It's a very, very long time to be isolated and to be away from our art and away from other artists. I've certainly learned how to appreciate the internet during this very, very difficult time. So I hope everyone else is keeping their sanity as well. So my name is Glenn Hayden. Excuse me. I am going to look at my screen every now and then because I've got a couple of notes that I don't want to forget during this next hour. If you could wait for your questions till after I've finished talking, otherwise I'm going to be keeping on looking down at questions, etc., and I probably won't be able to keep up. I'm an old man, remember. So yeah, my name is Glenn Hayden. I'm currently the Artistic Director of Chakravyuh Performing Arts, based here in Mumbai, and I'm also the lead trainer with Mobius Strip Productions. 2 different companies. One is a theatre and production house, and the other one is more about corporate training using theatre. So tonight I'm going to be talking about myself, my career, my time in India, which has been about 6 years, and also we'll get on to talking about honouring the text, which is something I'm quite passionate about. So as an artist, I'll skip the early teenage years, as most of us. I fell in love with theatre at a very young age. By 14, I decided that I would love to be an artist and to be an actor. That was my goal. The tipping point for me was I was at a live production of Romeo and Juliet, and Mel Gibson was playing Romeo. He had just graduated from NIDA, which is the National Institute of Dramatic Arts in Australia, and I was sitting there, I think I was in the 3rd row or something, and I was watching Mel Gibson play Romeo, and he was relatively unknown. I was 14, and I thought, I think I can do better than this guy, which was very, very arrogant of me as a teen, but more so it was through his fantastic performance and Angela McGregor's performance of Juliet that really made me fall in love with this whole idea of being an actor, but also being live. And that carried through with me all of my career, the idea of live theatre being the ultimate for me. So from 14, I decided that's going to be my career choice. I was very, very fortunate to have a mother who supported my decision. As a good mother, she said as long as I do it well and as long as I work hard and commit to it, then that's fine. So I finished my schooling, and there was a school opening in my hometown in Perth called the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, but it was opening in 2 years' time. I was only 15 when I left school, and I had 2 years to wait until this drama school was going to open. I was too young, and I knew I didn't want to move states at that time. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? And luckily enough, I went to a technical college and I studied set design for 2 years. Little did I know that I was going to become a director, and that set design was going to become one of my greatest allies as part of my art form. So I studied set design for 2 years without any intention of being a set designer, but during that time I learnt as much about theatre as I could possibly have learnt without the actor part of it. So I'd learned all about the concepts of design, about colour theory, about stage management, about this whole beautiful idea of that the ensemble is beyond just the actors. The ensemble is actually a whole lot of people with a whole lot of different skills and a huge amount of different art forms that they bring to make this one thing called the piece of theatre. So at the end of that 2 years, I auditioned, and I was one of the youngest people to be accepted into WAPA, as we call it. To put WAPA into context, it's where Hugh Jackman studied, Fran O'Connor, a lot of people that are working in the industry internationally. So yes, I auditioned and I got in, and I was only 17, and it was a very, very young age to go into a full-time 3-year course, especially an actor's course. There's such a lot of time spent on delving quite deep into your own thoughts, and at 17 it was far too young. So at the end of the first year, I actually decided I would take a gap year and take a year off, and thank goodness the college said, look, they're quite happy for me to take a year off, and I'll start again in 1 year's time. And it was probably the best decision I could have made for my career. In that 1 year, I went out and I worked, and I had moved out of home, and I learned how to live and be part of the world. And considering I had chosen an art form and a vocation, which was to tell stories of the world, I'm so glad that I had that year to really consolidate who I was on this planet and what I wanted to do, and some of my thoughts about the world and the people on it. And it really was an amazing time for me to then start again into my actors training. I'm a huge advocate of actors training. Obviously people can do it without going to a formal college. What I found absolutely joyous was that I had 3 years of concentrated effort of focusing on my craft, from 7 in the morning till 6 at night, sometimes much later, every day of the week. Working on your craft was a joyous thing. So that 3 years was an incredible time. It was incredibly challenging. It really does make you confront yourself, physically, spiritually, emotionally. You're constantly working on your body, on your voice, on your imagination, which really is such a necessity for any actor. So I graduated a long time ago in 1986, and entered the industry straight away, thank goodness. I was very fortunate to get my first job with the State Theatre Company at the time, which was the Playhouse Theatre in Western Australia, and I started my actor's career. And I had an amazing 10 years of being an actor, and fortunately I stayed employed quite a lot for that 10 years. It's a very different platform in Australia, where there's the agents system, which makes getting work in a way a lot simpler, but also there's a lot of regulation around the industry, so finding paid work was not easier, but it was there, and there were regulations around what is a minimum wage for an actor, etc. I did one cooperative, a profit share, and I understand intrinsically how difficult that is for any artist to be getting their own work up and running without any funding or without any sponsorship or commercial support. It's such a hard task. So I was very, very lucky. I worked very hard as an actor, and during that time, if I did have unemployed moments, I was never one to sit around and do nothing, and so I would instigate my own work. Not so much plays, but organisations and infrastructures for people to be able to make plays. One of my greatest prides is that in 1987, myself and several actors started an organisation called the Western Australian Actors Centre and the Blue Room Theatre. And we worked very, very hard at finding a building. We got support from the state, we got support from the local union and the local industry, and we set up an organisation primarily for the development of new works and for the training and development of emerging artists. Thankfully, in 2020, the organisation is still going. The building has been beautifully renovated. It's a wonderful, wonderful workhouse of new works, and many, many, many wonderful Australian plays and wonderful Australian artists have come out of the Blue Room Theatre and what was then called the WA Actors Centre. During that time, I also, in that 10 years, I was doing things like dabbling in being an agent for comedians. If we got a schools program together, we were taking Shakespeare into schools. I started several smaller arts organisations, and we always worked towards this idea of we are trained artists and we're professional artists, so we deserve to pay our rent through our craft, which ultimately means diversifying the craft. And it's something that I found I had quite a good knack for, which was how to utilise theatre and my skills as an actor and as a teacher, which I hadn't really become then, but my natural penchant for being able to teach, and how to utilise those skills in other areas. So I found myself working in sectors like the youth sector. I've worked in the disability sector, even in the prison systems, all utilising my craft, which was theatre, and certainly my acting craft, and using it and transforming it into ways which would actually be more helpful and more useful and meaningful for other people of the community to utilise. So what that did for me was really solidified in my own mind and in my own heart the reason why art is so important on our planet, and that everybody does utilise art in some way, whether it's through education or whether watching television or the glasses we wear have been designed by an artist, and that art is such an intrinsic part of the way that we live as human beings, because we do have a conscience and we do have thought and we do have the ability to have taste and to make critical judgments and to have critical debate and critical discussion about things. And that's where art and the humanities really does come into its own fore. So it was a really incredible time for me, that 10 years, not just working as an actor, but also working as an artist and understanding my place as an artist as a vocation, and not just a hobby or not just something that would put me in the limelight. I was never really that attracted to the whole idea of being a star. Success is wonderful, and I think award systems are fantastic for very deserved people, but my main aim was to be a working artist and to live my life and to pay my way through my life as an artist. And that was really, really important for me, and it took over from this whole idea of, well, not took over, it made me rethink what my idea of success is. And success for me is when I can look back at my year and I have worked as an artist and I have paid my way as an artist, and that my art has actually informed or entertained or transformed somebody's life. In about 10 years after I'd started acting, a friend of mine who graduated not long after I graduated from WAPA asked me to come and direct a play for the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. And I had never thought of being a director. It was always that I was an actor to be directed. And I actually said no at the beginning. But we talked for a while, and she explained to me what the play was. She explained to me what the platform was, where the play was going to be done, what the festival meant, why she thought that I had the temperament for this particular play. And so I agreed. And I relocated to Melbourne. I'd relocated several times for work, but I once again relocated to Melbourne to direct the play. And I must say that my first day in the rehearsal room as a director was like getting out of jail. I suddenly felt the artist that I was meant to be. I suddenly felt that the responsibility that is demanded from the director was something I was very, very comfortable with. It didn't scare me, it didn't daunt me. It made me work very, very hard. And because I had been working as an actor for so long and had been a trained actor, I understood what actors wanted from a director. I had an intrinsic and a deep-seated understanding of the fears of an actor and what an actor's homework is and what an actor needs in the rehearsal room. So it was a very, very joyous and very, very liberating experience, and thank goodness the play went well, and it got some fantastic reviews, and it made me realise that I did want to pursue this idea of being a director. So without wanting to go back to university, I found an amazing few mentors who guided me as a director, all of them, funny enough, women, and I scored gigs with them and with their companies as an associate artist, and so I trained with them on the floor in full-time rehearsal periods, but also in the machinations of being a director within a company. It's not just the art that is happening on the rehearsal room floor or in the theatre. To be a director, it's about the research that's required, it's about the scheduling, it's about the nuts and bolts of getting a play up as well, and working quite closely with producers and the general managers and the marketing teams. But then also, obviously, how do we nurture actors to be their absolute best? And ultimately that's what a director's job is to give the vision of the production that they've decided to do, and with the script that they've decided to utilise, but also how do we guide our actors to be the best that they can possibly be within our vision. So I worked quite extensively with a company called Deck Chair Theatre under a wonderful, wonderful director, Angela Chaplin. And then I also became associate artist of another amazing company called Melbourne Workers Theatre under the guidance of Susie D, another incredible director. And I got to experience some of the most innovative and most meaningful theatre of my career. Both of them were quite left-wing, quite socially conscious theatre companies, and so really they had at the heart of them very, very good reasons to make theatre. And what that taught me was that if we choose a play to do, then we must have at the beginning the reason to do the play. And that became very, very important to me as a director in my selection of scripts. It's not just about well, I like it, so I want to direct it, but it's why now? Who is the audience? Is it a meaningful experience for an audience in this time? And that can also be, is it just pure entertainment? It doesn't always have to be hit on your head politics or hit on your head moral. It can be pure entertainment. But I think it's part of the director's process is to think about why this play and why now, and who is my audience. So, yeah, so I had a lovely, lovely few years working as associate artists around the country, and also producing my own work and finding companies that would produce my own plays, and to flex my director's skills and to really learn and to solidify what it meant to be a director. All of this, which we will talk about a little bit later, was very, very much in the realm of being text-based theatre. I have a huge passion for text-based theatre. I love text, I love the word, I love writers. I think they are extraordinary human beings who give voice to many, many things that need to be spoken about, and the good writers speak about them in wonderful, wonderful ways. So my director's journey was very well on the way. I'd started teaching quite a bit. I was guest lecturing around the country in universities and colleges and in schools, and I'd been artistic director of several programs. I had a wonderful job where I was artistic director of a theatre program for disabilities, artists with disabilities, with a company called DADA, which is Disabilities in the Arts, Disadvantage in the Arts Australia. And to this day, I think it's some of of my best work and some of my most creative work. And that assignment, which went on for a couple of years, really taught me about empathy. And empathy not just for people in the community, but empathy for the artist, and how important it is to understand the artist that we have cast, and to understand the reasons why we have chosen particular actors and particular artists for particular jobs, and then to have empathy for their skills, which then we can capitalize on, basically, for the good of the production. We often, I often find myself in situations of talking about casting and with actors, especially in workshops and personally, and it's a massive part of the job, a huge, incredible part of the job. There's the old cliche that if you get the casting right, 80% of your job is done as a director, and there's a lot of truth in that. We don't just choose talent, but we choose the work ethic of an artist. We also choose is their opinion of the world and the way they operate in the world and their thoughts about the world, is it right for that particular play, but is it also right for that particular role? We choose actors that we feel will have an empathy for a role. So unfortunately, a lot of actors get typecast quite a bit because of the type of person they are. In theatre, it's a little bit more flexible. In film and television, obviously, it's very, very much about who you are and physically who you are. But in theatre, there is a little bit more flexibility, but generally you are cast because of what you will bring to that particular role and in that particular play. But then, of course, to that particular production, which is the director's vision. And it's very important for the director, well, I believe, in the audition process to discuss what the vision of the production is, so the actor, before they actually do their audition, has an understanding of what it is I'm after and what qualities I'm looking for in the person as well as the actor. Also during this period, I was directing festivals. I've directed several large-scale festivals and large-scale events. If I was directing a festival, I would generally direct the opening event, and that led me to be directing some sporting events as well. My largest audience was 50,000 in a stadium. So directing a festival was an incredible experience. My largest festival that I was the artistic director of, we had something like 350 events in a 15-day period. And that was an extraordinary experience to curate 350 events into a 15-day slot, and to find some shape within a festival which can guide an audience to keep wanting to come back for those 15 days. Luckily, all the festivals I've directed also have an open program element where anybody who wants to be part of the festival can actually come on board. But there is, yes, a curated element as well. And that's where I learned that I loved big as well, especially directing the opening events or closing events of festivals, where I would have casts of hundreds on very, very large outdoor arenas. And I really fell in love with the idea of something so enormous. So I had this very, very fortunate situation where I loved the small, the intimate one-hander, two-hander theatre piece for an audience of 150 to 200 people, right through to the epic, where there's an audience of 50,000 and helicopters landing and choirs of 200, etc., etc. And so what I was very pleased about was ultimately it makes me more employable as an artist if I have a really broad ability as a director. So by the end of that whole period, I really was quite solidified as a director and an artistic director, and that's where I applied for and got my first job as an artistic director of a theatre company. which was Urban Myth Theatre Company based in Adelaide, South Australia. It was primarily a youth theatre company. We had a children's program, but we also went up to 27, 28-year-olds, which was more about the emerging artists and training young artists to go on to further training, full-time training, or to go into the industry. I was with that company for 10 years, and it was an extraordinary experience. As an artistic director of a company, you are also on the business side of the thing, of the beast. So not only do you artistically flex your muscles through your programming and through your direction of your plays, but also you're running the business side of a company, so it can be sustainable and you are employing the best artists possible. And it was a glorious experience. During that time, and since then, I've commissioned about 27 plays. As I said, I have a great passion for writers, and I love text. So I was very fortunate through a company to be able to actually commission writers to take a brief, a strong brief, and then go away and come back with an amazing play. And I discovered through that period my absolute passion for working with writers, not so much from the beginning of their process. I'm a great believer in letting the writer go with a strong brief and to be the artist they are and to write what they want to write under the brief. But then to bring it back and to work with the director and several cast members to do the dramaturgical work and to take it into a second, third, fourth draft. And I love that process with writers, having a writer in the room with a bunch of actors and to see the joy on a writer's face when all of a sudden their words are coming out of an actor's mouth. And that's where we find out what actually does work and doesn't work. And you have the writer in the room, so you have the ability to be able to recommend changes to the script and work with the writer to reshape and reform the structure of the play, and character sometimes, and plot. And that's where we get rid of whole scenes or get rid of lines and change things and reimagine the play sometimes, and then let the writer go away and to write their final rehearsal draft. So I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to work with writers and to go through that process and to enjoy that process and to be able to instigate that process of commissioning 27 plays. During the Urban Myth time, it was also a glorious time of an awards-winning time for me. Having a company, you have the resources to produce some beautiful works and to get the reputation of the company. And a reputation of a company and of a director within the company is quite important. And to be on that platform and then to be on a receiving end of nominations and awards nationally, statewide and internationally was very glorious for me, for the company. To be an artistic director, to see your company fly in that way is a very glorious thing, and I thank goodness that I did have that experience. It also doesn't hurt your CV to be able to put a few awards on there. So it was an amazing time with Urban Myth, and in 2009 with that company, we had produced an adaptation of George Orwell's 1984, specifically for a high school audience. So it was older actors, but performing for high school audiences. And I went to one of the performances. I hadn't directed it, I was just producing it. And I went to see one of the performances to see how the show was going. And there were 4 or 5 Indian people sitting up in the back row, and they weren't with one of the schools. And I thought, I wonder who they were. I'm always interested to know where our audience comes from and how they get to hear about our plays. And it happened to be actors that were on a national tour from India of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which Quasar Thakor was in the cast. And so I got chatting to Q, and it was a really lovely meeting in our theatre. And he happened to mention whether I knew any companies that would be willing to bring a play specifically for a younger audience to Mumbai to be part of the Fesbo Festival. And I immediately put my hand up. And the following year, we brought a production of a very Australian children's play called The Pirate Ship again with adult actors, but performing for children. And so we played the festival at the Prithvi, and then we toured to several schools around Mumbai. During this time, I fell madly in love with Mumbai. I jokingly say, but it's quite true, the doors opened of the Mumbai airport, and I smelt and sensed Mumbai, and I felt like I was home. And it was a very, very similar feeling to what I had felt on my first day of directing. So I took it quite seriously, because I understand that feeling can actually mean something. So my plan was to come back to India one day. I didn't know how long I was going to be with Urban Myth, but I knew that I did want to come back to Mumbai and to work as an artist and to work with Indian artists. During that brief tour that we were here for the month, I managed to work with 7 young artists here, and it was glorious for me. The two worlds coming together of the Australian trained actor and the Indian artist was magical, and I didn't want to. It was the beginning of my thinking of I wanted these worlds to clash without lessening either of the energies of the different types of acting and the different approaches that the two cultures brought to the craft. So the little germ had started of that I joyously wanted to come back to India. As it happened, in 2014, the government that got in Australia wasn't too friendly with the arts, and the arts rely on funding. About 70 to 80% of its existence is on funding. And unfortunately that government didn't really embrace the arts as the past government, and Urban Myth after 30 years was defunded. And unfortunately we had to fold the company, and I found myself an artistic director without a company. And so it was fortunate though, in the sense that it allowed me to come back to India. And I was working with a wonderful, wonderful actor, Kyla D'Souza, who I'd known since 2009, and we had been speaking, and she said, well look, why don't you come back to India and direct a play and do some teaching? And so I came back in the second half of 2014 and directed Out at Sea, a Slavomir Mojcik play, Out at Sea. And it was an amazing experience, and it's where I also got to meet Ramnika Dylan-Lobo, a beautiful, beautiful actor who I subsequently worked with again. So during that 6 months and working with Kyla and her company, Peas and Carrots, I fell more in love with India. And my 5-year plan of wanting to live here and to actually have a theatre company here and a school here, hopefully, really did emerge and solidify for me. So every year I came back, I would spend 6 months in Australia, earn some money, come back and do some teaching and produce theatre in Mumbai. And for the last 2 years, I've pretty much been here full time, which has been absolutely glorious. And just over a year ago, we opened Chakravyuh Performing Arts. So we launched the company with the production of A Solitary Choice, which Ramnika Dylan-Lobo performed in. It was a one-person play at G5A. We did a 16-show season in 2-3 weeks, which was awesome. And then we were invited to be part of the Tata Literature Festival, Literature Live program at the Prithvi, and we did Speaking in Tongues, which was another extraordinary experience. And that's led me to today, and being here in India, and teaching quite a lot, which is awesome. And before the coronavirus hit, directing quite a lot, and working with some extraordinary actors and artists, and really feeling like my creative life and my personal life is very much bound in Mumbai and in India. I haven't been to many other areas of India to work. I've visited, but not to work. I've been to Delhi to do a little bit of teaching. I was going to Goa quite often to do some teaching, but Mumbai has really been my base, and it's been an extraordinary experience. Unfortunately, I have to go back to Australia to renew the visa and to come back again, but now that we're online at the moment, it's going to be a little bit easier to continue the work. We haven't been doing so much acting lessons. online. I wanted to hold back from that. I found that the market was very, very flooded with workshops very, very quickly on Zoom. So we held back, and I've been doing weekly sessions with a group of 30 actors who I've been working with for the last year and a half, 2 years, and also through Mobius Strip, my other job, working with the corporates doing training online. And we also have quite a strong children's program, which is fantastic. So online has been a really bizarre experience, and this is even more bizarre because I'm not interacting with anyone. I feel like I'm talking to myself sometimes, but it's a reality, and I think artists have been very, very hard hit by this pandemic. Not to disempower what has happened to everybody on the planet, but certainly artists who are such collaborators and in need of that collaborative energy to be able to produce works. It has been snatched away from us, and it's very, very difficult, and our mental health well-being needs to be very, very nurtured and looked after. And I keep saying to some of my younger artist friends, make sure you keep blaming the virus and not blaming yourself if you don't feel like you're doing enough. It's okay to do nothing for a minute, but just to stay really, really healthy, mentally, soul and physically, obviously. So here we are today, and Coconut Theatre very, very kindly invited me to come and speak this evening. I think Coconut Theatre have been doing extraordinary things online since we've been in lockdown, and this series has been quite amazing. It's been very, very wonderful. So here I am to talk about honouring the text. I am just going to look at my notes to make sure that my computer hasn't gone to sleep, just to make sure that I keep on track. So as I said before, text is really, really important to me. I love writers. I love their view of the world, and I have such a great admiration for the loneliness that comes with being a writer. They are one of the major elements of our craft in theatre and film, where they really do work solo, and they spend a lot of time in darkened rooms by themselves, nutting through these words and nutting through who these characters are within the world of the play that they've created. And the work that we know that we do as director and actors, of deciphering these roles within a play's world. The writer has done it for every character and for every moment of the play, and so they really are the parent of the whole world of the play, and I have a great admiration and a great respect for that craft. Hence I have a great respect in the rehearsal room for on paper or on to computer screen. I'm not anti-changing text at all. I'm anti a laziness within changing a text. I think the honouring of a text is to actually look at the words that have been given to us and to understand why the writer has chosen particular words for a particular role or for a particular moment. Now, I think when we look at not necessarily honouring the text, and it's probably a bad choice of words, because I think when we do adaptations and we do alter text, we're still honouring the play, but we are changing the writer's words, and we must be very, very conscious that we are doing this, and hopefully we are doing it with the permission of the writer as well. So when we're looking at altering a text, I think there's several different ways we are doing that. We are either writing a full adaptation, which is probably my preferred altering of a text, where a writer from either a different culture or from a different time period is doing a complete rewrite of a play. And now the reason I do enjoy that the most, I suppose, when we're looking at changing a text is that generally there is a writer on board who is part of that process, and in a sense they are writing a new play inspired by an older play or a text that has already been written, very similar to doing an adaptation of a novel or a short story or even of a film. So generally during an adaptation there is a writer on board. I do know there are a lot of writer-directors, and I have such a huge admiration for anybody that can take on both roles at once. I think it's a blessing and possibly a curse to be able to multitask that much. So yeah, the adaptation for me is probably my favoured altering of a text. There's been some beautiful adaptations of Chekhov's and of Beckett's, and so many other great playwrights where I'm speaking specifically about Australia at the moment, where they have removed these plays from a European context and put it into an Australian context. And there's been some very, very successful adaptations. But it's been a writer that has done the adaptation. It hasn't been just changes to a text. It's been a full adaptation. I guess the other popular changing of a text is the relocation of a play. And I do have a problem with when we relocate through a laziness. And not so much a laziness of the artist, but an assumed laziness or an assumed inability of an audience to be able to understand where this play is or what the characters are doing because of the original text. An example is, generally during a season of my plays, we always do one performance where we have a Q&A with the audience, and in India it is certainly, the question has always come up in every show I've done here, of why did we not relocate it to India? And my immediate answer is, well, I think you, the audience, are smarter than that. I think if a play mentions New York, we know we're talking about a major city. If we talk about having a sandwich, we know we are talking about food. If we mention the name John or Janine or Elizabeth, we know we are saying somebody's name. So for me, it's more about a respecting of the audience's intelligence, that we're not necessarily relocating the play. Now, I also understand, and I've done it myself, where we do relocate a play, and we can do it quite successfully, as long as the vision behind the production requires that. I suppose one of the things I do as a director is I try to choose plays that I believe are quite universal. So they're not necessarily specific to a place. They're plays that one production could travel the whole world, and any audience from any culture and any country and any background could actually enter the world of the play. And that's quite important to me, that plays are universal. Again, this is just me. I'm not saying this is a locked down rule. Art is art because the rules change all the time, and rules are there to be broken. But for me, I love to be able to take plays that have universal themes and that the characters are universally accessible from an audience. So I never have felt like I've needed to change location, change names, change the name of food. It's never really struck me as something that's a necessity for the play to work. I'm sure I will come across a time when there is a play that I think, okay, well, let's set this play in Mumbai, and let's make this definitely non-Catholic Indian characters. Fortunately, if it's a Western play, you can generally get away with all the characters are Catholic if they're Indian actors, but sometimes that doesn't work either. So there will come a time where I do relocate a play. For an example, I was looking at a play that we're going to produce next year, and my original thought was to do a complete Hinglish adaptation of this text, and I've worked quite hard at looking at writers and looking at this idea of adapting the text from a very Australian story to more of an Indian environment and an English text. But of late, and in lockdown, I was speaking to an Indian artist friend, and they asked me why, which is the perfect question. And we must always ask why. And they asked me, why do I want to change it? And my answer was to make it more accessible. And he said, well, I disagree with you. I think it's an incredibly accessible story. These characters are very rich. They're very rich in their depth. I mean, it's a very, very accessible story and plot and character. And I reread the play and I realized he was right. And in actual fact, what I was doing was falling into the trap of something that I disliked myself, which was to change the text to make it easier. And I think that is the biggest no-no, and the biggest mistake we can make is to change a text to make it easier. Texts are joyful when they're hard, and texts are meant to be hard, and our job is a difficult job. We are creating human beings. We are learning how to tell a lie truthfully to an audience, and that's a really difficult job. I think to be a creator of art is one of the hardest jobs in the world, and to interpret text and to interpret the world is a very difficult job, which is why artists are generally the most empathetic people on the planet. We don't just play the murderer who is murdering, we try to understand why they are murdering. So we become very empathetic people. And so, to get back to the original point, it needs to be asked, why am I altering the text? And I think if the answer is because it's easier, we really must question that decision to change things. I hold steadfast that the audience are much smarter than we think, and that I don't think we should change it to make it easier for the audience. Because I don't think we can think for the audience. If we're changing it to make it easier for the actor, then I think it's very dangerous as well. As I said, the job of the actor and the director and everybody involved in making art is a difficult one. The joy that I find with a difficult text is that to mine that text and to get under the words and to understand why the writer has written these particular sounds, and for a character to use particular words to explain something, that is the key. That is the entry point for all those secrets that we need to find and to expose as artists, to then be able to portray these people and to tell this story. If we make the job easier by getting rid of these words and sounds too quickly, we are most likely, not just possibly, but we are most likely ignoring the secret into the character and into the text. So if we are going to change particular words, then it must happen after we have mined the original word, after we have really solved the problem of the original text, and then possibly, quite possibly, we are justified to change a word. So it's our job to discover why the writer has spent hours and hours, and we know writers, we know that they spend a long time deciding on words. Why have they chosen the word? The other aspect of the written word is that ultimately words are sounds, a collection of sounds that we have decided as a community mean something. If we take away the meaning of a word, we just have sound. And I know a lot of writers, and a lot of the good writers I know, who think about the sounds of words. They think about the consonants that a character is using. They think about the vowel sounds that a character is using. Shakespeare was a complete master of this, and to the point where he would invent words because he wanted the sound. It wasn't because there were no words to describe something. It's because he wanted particular sounds for the character to have. Dare I say, I mean, for a writer now to invent words the way Shakespeare wrote, we would probably laugh them off the stage. So his arrogance was extraordinary, and that's where his genius lay, in the sense that people would flock to his theatre to hear the new Shakespeare word of the month. And I find that such a fascinating aspect of Shakespeare. So to get back to the point, I mean, writers choose sounds. And if we are going to replace their words, God forbid that we have to, but if we do have to replace their words, we must think about the structure of the word, the syllables that are within the word, the sounds that this word that they've originally used uses, because it is the key to the character. It is key to the emotional moment that we are trying to portray. Our job is to allow our audience to be relaxed enough to be able to accept the story, and to then let the story affect them. And part of that is in the structure of the text. The sounds that a writer uses, they inspire the audience to want to feel and to want to hear this story and to want to hear this particular character's story. So I beg anybody who is going to alter text is to think about the original word quite deeply before they make an alteration. The other aspect of changing text, which is probably I've been more guilty of, is the edit. And I, particularly with Shakespeare, I certainly edit Shakespeare's. Oh, someone's giving me an angry face. I'm sorry if I'm upsetting anybody. Again, as I said at the beginning of the session, this is my view. Art is made in very, very different ways, and I would never say to an artist they're wrong. The joy of our craft is that it's full of artists producing works in different ways, and that's the joy of as an artist, to see other artists work. I would never say no. But yeah, so to get back to the edit, I've certainly edited texts, and I'm just trying to think, but I think the only text I've actually ever edited by cutting down is a Shakespearean text. Shakespeare, for many different reasons, which are around when he was doing theatre and the noise of the theatre and just the audiences he were playing to, he repeated himself quite often. A lot of his characters retell information that has been told before, and sometimes it's a choice, it's a character choice, because the character will tell the story differently. So I have edited text before, but again, it's a skill, it's an art to be able to edit text. It's not just a cut. It's about making sure that there is still the shape and structure and flow to a text that happens. The last changing of text, which I absolutely abhor, is the paraphrase. When actors get away with paraphrasing a text, for my productions, I don't let actors do it. I do not let them paraphrase the text unless we've had a very, very deep and creative and artistic discussion about changing words. Now, there's several reasons for that. The first, obviously, being they're altering an artist's work. They're changing an artist's work, which is the writer, and without permission they are doing that. But also, and it's the bigger issue for me, is that if they're paraphrasing, it means they're using their words. They're not using the character's words. And all of a sudden, the actor is much more alive in the conscience of the character rather than the character. So I think it's a really big no-no for me, paraphrasing of text. I think it's too much based on impro. We never know what's going to come out of the mouths of an actor if they're used to paraphrasing, which means the other actors aren't able to trust what is happening on stage. They're not able to know exactly what the character or their scene partner is about to say, and we must know we must know, if we are on the stage, we must know what our fellow actor is about to say or do, so we can structure our reaction. We can shape our performance so the audience is getting the best story possible. If we're relying on an ad-libbed improvisation and paraphrasing on stage, again we're forcing our scene partners for the actor to remain too alive and to not let the character take over. And so that's my main dislike of paraphrasing. I have seen beautiful performances, wonderful performances, where the company in particular is more about improv theatre, and where the paraphrasing of text happens in an enormous amount. But these actors have been working and training together for a very, very long time, and so they do have a sense of what is happening with their scene partner. So it's a different art form almost, and it's certainly much more in the improv arena. So that's kind of my take on the why we should honour the text. That hour has gone incredibly fast. I haven't left much time, and I have no problem going over time for some questions. I did want to write, a friend of mine, Stephen House, who's a playwright who's Australian, but he's won international awards all over the place, and I said to him, 10 words or less, which he didn't stick to, of why should we honour the text, and he wrote, a playwright has put down every single word for a reason, and that should be respected. Those words unlock the script. They should be analysed and used, and I think that's a really, really nice way to put that. Thank you for letting me ramble on for so long. And again, I'll reiterate, I'm talking about my theatre. I'm talking about how I make theatre. I'm not talking about how anybody should make theatre. I don't like the word should. I don't think anybody should make theatre in any particular way. I don't think there is one way to make theatre. I think there's thousands of ways to make theatre. There are tried and true methods and techniques, yes, but it's also our job as artists to innovate. So again, I don't tell anybody that they all should be doing it the way I do it. This is just the way that I work, and I make theatre the best. So I'd love to read some questions from you. I'm just going to scroll back because there were a few already. From Tusha, I've mentioned empathy several times in your presentation. Thus, kindly share your perspective as a director, an art director and curator, about the importance of empathy. Does empathy to the original, I'm trying to see more, the original text play a part in adaptation of a script? So the short answer to that, Tusha, is yes. I think we must empathise with what the original text is trying to do and what the original writer is trying to do. I think if we cannot empathise with that, we cannot ever really get into the heart and the soul of what the original text was doing. It also would mean if we don't attempt to empathise, or we don't take on that task, which is part of our job to empathise with the text, we don't go deep enough into the text. A good play will have so much subtext in it, and that becomes our inner text. So our job as creators and storytellers is to find the subtext of these plays. If we're doing an adaptation of a Chekhov, Chekhov is all subtext. Nearly every word that is coming out of a character's mouth is generally opposite to what they're actually saying. So we must be able to empathise with his original words to be able to do a successful adaptation. I hope that answers that. Okay, top fan. Which Indian theatre play actor you like most? Share your thoughts. There are so many plays and actors that I like. I very, very, very rarely say who is my favourite. It depends on genre. It depends on which period they're coming from. It depends on the style of theatre that they do. So I'm kind of very unwilling to say who is my favourite actor. Generally, my favourite actors are the ones that I'm working with at the time, because I need to be in love with them to be able to do the work and to assist them and to nurture them to be their best. So I don't really have any favourite actors or favourite plays or favourite directors. There's too many. Share my thoughts on Mulgahi as a musical Broadway. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Share my thoughts on Broadway musicals, if that is the question. Yeah, they're great. Some of them I love, some of them I don't love. It depends on the mood. It's not my favourite genre, but I used to be a singer, so I used to get quite a lot of work in musicals, and so I understand the art form. I think it's a really important art form. I much prefer music in plays rather than a musical. It's something I love about a lot of Indian theatre that I've seen, the more contemporary work, where there's music within the play, which is character driven. Not so much the Bollywood idea of let's put a song in here to be a hit single, but that idea of allowing a character's voice to come through song as well, I really love. I did a beautiful play as an actor a long time ago for the Melbourne International Festival called Little City, which the score was written by Irini Vella, and it's about 75% sung by a choir, and the storytelling, and it was a play about community, and the storytelling came from choral music, and it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. Cool, I hope that answers that. In editing Shakespeare, do you keep the meter, the iambic pentameter, or that is not necessary? Look, I think Shakespeare is Shakespeare because of his investigation and use of the iambic pentameter and his other poetry. I think if you're altering his text, which is the poetry, then I think, yes, we must stick to the iambic pentameter to be a true rendition. For a pointing an example, it's like Romeo and Juliet. When they meet, it's such an in to their characters, because Romeo is the one that mainly talks in poetry. He is the romantic fool. Romeo he's in love with love. Juliet is much more down to earth, and she speaks mainly in prose. So it's actually an in to the character, the fact that Romeo is using poetry and speaking in iambic pentameter, where Juliet is speaking mainly in prose. It's a really, really big distinction, especially in the balcony scene. So I hope that answers that. Yeah. What was my most challenging project? My most challenging project to date, I think, was most likely Speaking in Tongues, which is an Andrew Bovell play. It's an incredible script, and it's 4 characters. A lot of the time it's 4 characters in the one scene, but they're actually playing different scenes, and so the dialogue crosses over quite a lot, and oftentimes the characters are saying the same thing, the same exact words, but they're actually in different environments on the same stage. And so it's choreography of words and sound as well of actors, and the blocking. So it was an incredible challenge, and one that I hope I did some justice to, and that'll be a return season when it comes back. Luckily, I had 4 incredible actors playing in that play. But yeah, very, very challenging play. I think I find every project that I do challenging, and I love that. I love the fact that I find every play as important to me, and the most important play in my career while I'm directing it, because I think that allows me to give my whole into the text and into the process of rehearsing a play. I love it. Cool. Oh, here we go. Fantastic session. Happy that you were reconfirming my thoughts about text. My pleasure, Ila. My absolute pleasure. It's a wonderful thing. Words are beautiful. It's one of our major ways of communication, and when we decide to shape words, I mean, in our daily life, we don't necessarily shape words to magnify the meaning. But the fact that we deal with text where somebody has sat down and shaped a sentence, or shaped a monologue, or shaped a dialogue, is extraordinary. That's one of the reasons I love Beckett as well, Samuel Beckett's work, where he is so dictatorial in the use of his language, and it makes sense. When you stick to his instruction, it makes so much sense. And then what that allows is the freedom within the text to play with your production. If we try to go off the text, we have to do all that work again that he already did for us. There's an amazing play of his called Rough for Theatre 2, which was actually written as an exercise. And his dictatorialism is even to the point of the lamps that are on stage and when the light is up on who's speaking. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of text. Absolutely amazing. Where would you prefer teaching, online or in person? In person, Renee, in person. As far as I'm concerned, theatre and what we do is a contact sport. It's like a game of soccer. We have strategy and physical strategy, and we guide that ball, which is the play. And I miss so much. I miss the breath and the spit and the body language there present, and the energy that actors give off. I have a huge love and respect for actors. They are extraordinary human beings, and what they achieve is amazing. And to be denied being in the same room as actors, I find very, very difficult and quite heartbreaking at times. So online as a second choice, it's what we're living with at the moment. I made a decision when lockdown happened that I wouldn't try to teach acting online, so it's been more about the intellectual work, the uniting and beats of text, the breaking down of character, the Stanislavski 7 questions. But I haven't wanted to do acting classes online. My art form is theatre, not so much film and television, so I didn't want to get into a pretend role of camera classes, etc. There are much better people to give those classes, and they have been giving them. But I've enjoyed giving the intellectual work online. That's been really lovely, and it's been quite focused, which has been great. Subtext and where are we? Subtext and metatext play an important part in terms of empathy, in my humble opinion. I think you're right, Tusha. I think you're very, very right. I love subtext. And it's all wrapped up in that question which every actor and director must ask is why? Why am I saying this? If I pick up this cup on the word love, why am I picking it up on love instead of the word I? So if we take that phrase, I love you, there's 3 stories. I love you, and I love you. I'm being very broad and very flippant about that, but we must ask why. Why is the character saying this? Why am I moving here? Why am I sitting here? Why am I picking up that cup here? And the why leads us to the how and our objectives, and really all that we can play is the objective of the moment. That's all we can actually play to tell the story, is what is my objective? What do I want? How am I going to get it? What is standing in my way? What do I do to pass those obstacles? Even if it's as simple as exiting. What do I want? I want to get out of here. What's standing in my way? A piece of furniture. How do I solve it? Walk around it. So it's a good question. Why? In the current situation, is there a Shakespeare or Chekhov play that you would like to adapt? Excuse me. Not adapt, no. I am hankering to direct Twelfth Night again. I've directed Twelfth Night a couple of times, and I adore that play. It's so much fun to rehearse, incredible fun to rehearse. So no, I don't have an ambition to adapt either Chekhov or Shakespeare, but I do have a hankering to and a passion to direct Twelfth Night again, or Midsummer Night's Dream. They're both amazing. Adaptation for me also comes, especially with Shakespeare, is the adaptation can be where do we place the play. I saw an incredible production of Julius Caesar, and it was done in a pub, so as pub theatre. And what they did in Australia, there's the main drinking hall, I suppose, where the main bar is, with all the tables and chairs, and then we go to another room to either go to the washroom or to another room to go to the dining room, etc. And there's generally security cameras in all these different rooms. And what the director and production had done, all the conspiracy scenes within Julius Caesar were done in another room, but they were screened on the security cameras within the main hall of the pub. So the audience were actually eavesdropping, really, on these security cameras of these conspiratorial scenes, and it was awesome. It was an amazing. So the adaptation was actually more in location rather than changing the text. They had adapted in the sense of editing the text down, but a lot of people do that with Shakespeare. But that was very, very exciting theatre, very exciting. What is most difficult, acting or directing? I think they are both as difficult as each other, and I say that quite honestly. I think if something is easier, it is because that is where your heart lies. As I said at the beginning, when I discovered directing as my home as an artist, it wasn't because it was easier. It's because that's where my true artist soul wanted to be, wanted to live. So it's not easier, but it's important to work out who are you as an artist. Where is your home as an artist, and that is what makes it feel easier, because we have a natural in as a director, or a natural in as an actor. I mean, from a very young age, all I wanted to be was an actor. I didn't even think about directing. My whole passion was to be an actor, be an actor, be an actor. But as I said, when I found directing, it opened many doors for me. Glenn, sir, you were work as former program coordinator at Maroondah City Council. Yes. Can you share something about that? Sure. So I did quite a bit of work with city councils. So city councils in Australia is, so we have the city, then each suburb has its own council, which is called local government. So I've worked with many city councils in developing their arts program. So that was much more about community cultural development, with CCD, which is a beautiful philosophy, if you want to read more about it, if you do work with the community quite often. So yeah, it's community cultural development. And basically the underlying philosophy behind CCD is that you work with community as artists, not just artists working with community. So it's creating environments where the community, without wanting to professionally become an artist, but they can work as artists to tell their story. So it's not so much about like amateur theatre, but it's about working with community to allow them to tell their stories of their community. And it was very fulfilling work, incredibly fulfilling work. You have to actually let go of your own ego as an artist quite a lot when you're working in CCD, because you're allowing other people who aren't necessarily artists to be artists, and to make sure that they have success in that. Success, I don't mean financial success or career success, I mean an experiential success as an experience rather than as a vocation. But thank you for asking that. Not many people notice that kind of work, and it's wonderful. My thoughts about directing or acting in a play by Harold Pinter. Oh God, I mean, Harold Pinter is an extraordinary and wonderful enigma. His words are amazing. I think the main thing to study when approaching a Pinter play is when and where he was writing. He wrote for particular class systems within the British system, and we must have an understanding and an empathy for that, of when and where he was writing, and the voice that he was unearthing in his work to be able to successfully do a Pinter. It's not just about learning his pauses and silences and learning his very clever words, but it really is about understanding the voice that he was giving in his work and through his work. It was very, very particular. Very, very particular, and a very, very particular time in British history as well. Excuse me for coughing. Yeah, when he was writing must be understood if we are going to achieve his plays, and to know how to then do a successful production of his work within the context of modern India or modern Australia, modern America. Otherwise, we just end up looking at a Pinter play as a museum piece, which I think is very, very dangerous and very boring as well. I think if we find an understanding, which we must do with all playwrights, we must know where and when are they writing, because that will lead us into the why are they writing this. A play written, for example, if it's a play about the LGBTQ community 2 years ago in India, it's going to be very, very different than a play written now, because of Section 377 changing, and the law has changed. And so when we look at plays from the past, there is different law. There is different ways of believing in God. There is different ways that a community accepts certain things that a character does. So we must have an understanding of that before we can do a successful production or even a successful adaptation. We must understand where and when a play was written. I hope that answers that about Pinter. I love Pinter. I love Pinter. He's awesome. Viola is such a delight. Tushar, she is awesome. Shakespeare's women were incredible, and Shakespeare had such a wonderful understanding of women, considering when he was writing. So yeah, he's an amazing man. Thank you, Glenn. Glad to listen to you. My pleasure, top fan. Glenn, sir, you have 3 titles: writer, director, and teacher. So which one do you prefer the most? Look, I love. Sorry, I'm not a writer. I've never written. I've been a dramaturg on plays, working with a writer, but I've never written. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I could write a play. I tried writing once, and it's just not my world. I much prefer interpreting word than writing the word. So really, it's between director and teacher. Look, in a way, they're very similar roles for me as the nurturer. Obviously, as the professional director, I'm not teaching, I'm purely nurturing. But as a teacher, I'm also nurturing the emerging artist and sharing what I know and what I've experienced. And again, it's only what I know and what I've experienced or what I've been taught that I can share. I don't pretend to know everything about theatre. I'm not an academic of theatre. I'm a practitioner of theatre. I make theatre and I work with artists. I don't want to be an academic of theatre or art. It's something that doesn't interest me. So teaching and directing have a similar crossover, but directing is about nurturing the artist to be the best they can be, and to justify why I have cast them in the role within that particular production. Whereas teaching an emerging artist or teaching a young person or children, it's more about imparting knowledge that I've experienced or that I know. And I love both. I love working with emerging artists. I love being in the workshop room. And again, there's a crossover between the rehearsal room and the workshop room. They are both places for us to get it wrong, so we can find what works. I'm not necessarily interested in immediately finding how to do it right, but I love investigating what could possibly be wrong, because that's where we find our happy accidents, and it's where we find a new way to interpret a word or a situation or a character, is by being brave enough to risk getting it wrong. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And to find artists that are brave enough to go down that path is a magical thing as well. And I think that might be the end of the questions, and I've gone nearly half an hour over my time. So look, I'll call it an end unless somebody jumps in with an immediate question. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me your time and listening. And I hope we're out of lockdown as soon as possible. I hope they find a vaccine for us, and so we can start sweating and breathing together in the same room and on the workshop floor. So thank you to Coconut Theatre as well, and thank you all for coming. Good night, everybody.